Okay, so coming back and talking about, I want to clarify the differences between usable and useful because I feel like I botched them up, and I want to make sure you have a very clear understanding between the two. So coming back and making sure there's a clear understanding, let me come back here and pick up from there. Okay, so coming back to this definition again, I just want to make sure I make a clear distinction between the two because it's going to be on your test. Usable. Usable is just what it sounds like. Is it usable? Like, can I use it easily? So usable talks to, can I easily click around? Can I easily navigate the site? Can I easily click on the call to action buttons? Is it something, can I easily fill out the form fields? If I, does the app accommodate, is it equitable? Meaning, does it consider, like if I isn't it, does it consider if I have disabilities in terms of am I visually impaired or hearing impaired? Can I use it? If a person who is visually impaired comes to the site, are there things in place, considerations that I can still use the site? Can I still make the purchase? Can I still sign up for the newsletter? Can I still join? Can I still view my results? Can I use it? Useful, useful is more so what we were talking about in terms of, is there a reason for me to use it? Is it making my life easier? Is it making my experience easier? So did you take into consideration to add things that will be useful to me as an end user? So back to your example, when we talked about the person signing up for a service, an in-body assessment or a health assessment, it will be useful for me to be able to log in and actually see my results. That would actually be useful. That would be helpful. It would be useful for me to be able to track my progress. That's going to make it useful for me. It will be useful if you are located at a certain location that I can click on the map and map my way to your location. It will be useful if say for example, what would be another useful example that you think would be useful, Angela or Janella?
It's useful that, well, you kind of said everything.
But think of something else. You can think
Oh,
of,
it'd be useful if you can invite a friend.
yeah, that's useful and also enjoyable. What other services does the client offer? It will be useful if I can track my calories, right? Okay, so enjoyable, what would make it enjoyable in the use case of your client?
Like you said, like if maybe having if they achievements. Oh wow, you lost 1 pound this week.
Mhm.
Da-da-da. Like you said, maybe a star pickup or confetti fall, or you lost 5 pounds, or wow, you lost this many inches.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes it enjoyable. It makes it fun.
Hmm.
Yeah. Okay. And equitable. What are some things when we talk about equality? What are we talking about?
Male, female,
What else? What
they.
who are we considering? If we're making sure our app is equitable,
People with disabilities.
yeah, people with disabilities as well. Yep. Equitable and inclusive. So I want us to come back and explore some of these different applications, but I'm going to circle back to it. So we're going to look at Apple, Home Depot, FedEx, and look at one of your clients and kind of do an assessment of accessibility. Is it equitable? Is it enjoyable? And just look at it from a different lens, looking at the considerations that they took to make sure that it's equitable, to make sure that it's What are the four again? Because what are the four? It's equitable. You tell me, equitable, enjoyable. What are the other two?
Um,
Useful
equitable,
and usable.
Yeah.
yeah, enjoyable,
Yeah.
useful,
What's
and
the four again? Because that's gonna be on certification. What's the four?
usable, equitable, enjoyable, useful.
Say it one more time.
Usable, equitable, enjoyable, and useful.
Yep. Having a solid understanding on that is important. So we're going to look at these apps and we're going to assess how enjoyable they are, how useful they are, how usable they are, and how equitable they are. We talked about universal design because your project was awesome because it kind of pushed us ahead a little bit. But to go back to the concept of universal versus inclusive, universal design it's a previous design method that we don't follow anymore, right? But previously, when we were trying to solve the issue of making sure that the applications and products were inclusive, the first approach in the UX community was to do a one size fits all. That was the first approach, the first go at it. And as I was explaining before, when you think about one size fits all, think about trying to, with one swoop, accommodate everyone. And I gave the example of a header, a heading saying welcome. And I gave the example of text with a universal design, with the approach being to address everyone at the same time. The example I gave was, imagine coming to a website and you see words that say, welcome to my site. And then you see the words, and then after you see the words grow after 2 seconds. And then after they grow for 2 seconds, you audibly hear the site speaks to you and says, welcome to my site, right? And it does all three of those things without any prompting for you. That's your attempt to do a one size fits all. In contrast, when we look at inclusive design is where you solve for one but extend to many. So an example of that, using that same example, if we made the assumption that 90% of our users were not visually impaired, then we are designing specifically for, one demographic that's not, but we're still extending our design to someone who may be visually impaired so that they can experience it as well. So what that looks like is you come to the website and there's text there, and the text says, welcome to my site. If you are visually impaired and you use a screen reader, the technology is in place to read the text to you if it's needed, but it's not forced upon you. It doesn't make the assumption that you need it, but it does extend the feature and the capability. Is that a clear definition or a clear distinction for you between the difference of universal design and inclusive design? Yes, no?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, as far as inclusive, can you do universal again? I was kind of doing something.
Universal is one size fits all. So universal would be you trying to accommodate for everyone in one swoop. So the example I gave was you come to a website and it says, welcome to my site, right? That's what's written. And then let's say 2 to 3 seconds later, it gets bigger. It goes from 12 fonts to 34 for people who may have reading glasses. And then it automatically vocally has auditory features on it that says, welcome to my site. All three of those things happen without any prompting from the end user, because that would be like an example of a designer trying to do a one size fits all solution.
Oh, universal. Okay, I got you. Yeah, I didn't.
Right. Yep. Okay. So we do not exist in universal design. Universal design is not good practice. We don't do that anymore, but it's just so that you understand that was the initial approach. Right now, we exist in inclusive and equity-focused design, just so you know that.
Okay.
Equity-focused design is what we talked about previously, and we'll get deeper into that. Equity-focused design means that when you're designing something, you need to consider race, gender, ability, age, socioeconomic design. So whatever the design choices you make as a team need to be accessible and fair to everyone who may possibly experience the application or the product. There also needs to be specific and intentional consideration for people who are typically underrepresented, right? Underrepresented and overlooked. So in terms of forms, when you're designing a form, so as if it's a sign-up form, a member form, when you design the prompts, always ask yourself, is it really necessary? Is this information necessary? Because if you're asking for information that's not necessary for the job or for the task, you can be walking that borderline of bias. So to give a specific example for let's say you're filling out an application and you want to be a UX designer. Is it really necessary for the company to ask you what your gender is? Does that have does your gender play into whether or not you can fulfill the role as a UX designer? Is that a
No.
yes or a no?
No.
No, so why even have the question on the form?
Right.
But on the reverse side of that, or on the flip side of that, if the city or the country is conducting a census, right, or they want to know, like, what percentage of the population is male, what percentage of the population is female, what percentage of the population falls between the age range of 0 to 10 versus 10 to 20, right? If you're conducting a census, it makes sense to ask those questions. But even in asking those questions, the way you ask the questions have to be what word? Of the four things, what word? Do they have to be usable, useful, equitable, or useful? The way you ask the question has to be what? Of the four?
Equitable.
Yes, it has to be equitable.
Sorry, I was washing my hands.
Yeah, the way you ask the question has to be equitable.
Okay.
So, so let's look at this. Let's say, for example, if you're filling out a form and let's say it's a medical form at the hospital, right? Let's say you're getting checked in for service and you are the UX designer. Let's say University Hospital hires you as a UX designer and they are redesigning their intake form and you're redesigning the intake form. Now, medically, it's mandatory that there's a distinction between male and female, which maybe that's a bad example because honestly, I want to use a different example because that's a whole different. Let's say you're hired for okay, let's just say you're hired for the U.S. Census. You're hired for the government, and you're going to redesign their form. All right, let's use that example. So you have to identify, you know, the gender of the person.
Okay.
Is it more equitable for you to ask, should your check boxes be male, female, or other? Or what do you think the check boxes should be?
I think it should just be male, female at birth.
At birth. Okay. And then Janella, what do you think it should be? If you can respond. She may not be able to respond. Okay, so moving on.
I'm sorry, I was trying to come. What was the question as far as the census? Should it be male, female, or other?
You're redesigning the intake form. What do you feel about the form being male, female, or other? Do you think it should be that or it should be something else in terms of the check boxes to identify gender?
What is the intake form for? What company?
It's for a census.
Oh, for the census. Oh, well, I think it should be male or female, like how Angie said, because the census needs to know how many men or males or females are in the United States or wherever the area is.
Mhm.
So to make it more user friendly or equitable, then yes, you could add like at birth or so birth sex, birth gender, something like that.
Mhm. That's a very, yeah. So moving forward, based on the UX design principles now that are universally accepted based on the way the country is moving, this is actually the answer. The answer is male, female, gender non-conforming, non-binary, and a blank space so that they can write in whatever they want to write in. So that is an example of how when when you're designing for equity, usability, blah, 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 how it's always changing, right? So based on where we are now, the UX design best practice in the case where it's necessary to add it is to be inclusive and to add all of the other options.
No.
Right. So here's the thing. Everything that I'm teaching you is just so that you can pass your certification exam.
Oh, okay.
So for your certification exam, that's the answer. So the answer is like if you're presented with two forms and they want to know, what the first thing is it even necessary to ask at all? So
Okay.
some of the answers may be it's not even necessary to ask, because if it's a job application, it's irrelevant, right? If it's a medical application for something like a hospital, that's an entirely different conversation, because medically it's life or death. You have to define as either male or female, because when they're talking about when the nurse, the doctor, whoever is trying to prescribe medicine and care, you don't have the same flexibility to make all those other options. It's a life or death situation. So, you would have to actually be sensitive to your work environment, what the practices are for the company you work for, and then just overall legally where we are as a society and as a country. But the answer for the purposes of passing your certification exam, more than likely they're not taking into consideration the what am I trying to say? Not the hypothesis, but they're not taking into consideration the hypothetical scenario that you're working for a hospital. So they're looking more so if for some reason, if it's necessary, in the case of like a census, the answer is going to be male, female, gender non-conforming, non-binary, and there should be another option on here, which is also a blank space to, let me do that because I don't want to, let me just add that, because I don't want it to be ingrained in your head the wrong way. Hold on. Did I stop sharing? I didn't mean to stop sharing. Did I stop sharing?
Yes. Unless my screen is just. Yeah, no, I don't see it.
Okay. I had to add that because let me come back. Oops. Am I sharing again? Oh, nope, I'm not. Can you guys hear me, see me still?
Yes, and yes.
Okay, I added that just so you see it. So it's male, female, gender non-conforming, non-binary, and blank space for the applicant to enter. That's how you design your forms if gender is necessary. So inclusive and equity design. Once we move into the testing phase, right? And so once we get past what we did today, which is the workflows, and we're past wireframing, and we start adding the aesthetics and the specifics. An example would be like when Google first came out with their voice assistant feature on their applications. When they initially created voice assistant, they created it using an American native speaking male. That's how they trained voice assistant. So when they actually rolled out the voice assistant, it initially had an issue where it could not understand women because our pitch was higher and our voice inflection is a little different. And that was very frustrating because it wasn't inclusive. It wasn't inclusive and equitable. Another thing was initially voice assistant had a big issue with people with heavier accents. So when you're designing, it's important that you use when we move into the testing phase or like the development phase, the training phase, diversity and using a wide variety of people is very important. Image representation is something that sometimes is an innocent overlook because people typically choose avatars and images that look like them. So when you're creating an application and you're choosing stock photography, you're choosing models to represent use of a product, does your image representation represent everyone? Is it a diverse representation of the population? Right? So you don't want to have all of your images or your avatars or your icons specifically tailored towards a specific sex or a specific race. You want to make sure that you're all inclusive when you're mocking up your designs. Another thing is you want to make sure that when you design, so when we move past this workflow phase, we want to design for multiple platforms. So once you actually start designing the mocks, how do you think that we design with desktop in mind first, mobile in mind first, watch, TV, or tablet? Which do you think we design for first?
Desktop.
What do you think, Janella?
Desktop.
So the correct answer is in 2024, we designed for mobile first.
Oh, mobile. Okay.
The reason we did.
I was gonna say that makes sense because I went on a website the other day and it looks completely different on the actual site than on the mobile app. The mobile app was way better and functional, and then the website was just like, wait, what? This is not the same. Like,
So that's a good point. And there's a difference between mobile first and totally ignoring desktop. So mobile first does not mean that you disregard desktop. Both experiences need to be awesome experiences. But the reason that we design for mobile first is because more than 50% of people who surf the web surf the web using mobile devices. So you always cater to the majority when it comes to platforms first. So it's not that desktop should be less functional. It doesn't give permission for desktop or the other platforms to be less equitable, less enjoyable, less usable, and yes, less useful. They all need to have A's in all of those areas. But when I say we design for mobile first, when you're actually sketching, the first sketch needs to be the accommodation of how is this going to look on mobile. You establish that first. Not higher in priority, but first in terms of timeline, what you do first. So yeah, it's mobile first design. But when you're designing stuff, you also have to consider, especially when you're dealing with fitness apps, like what is the experience if someone logs in from their phone? I mean, from their watch, if they have an Apple Watch, what is that? Versus them logging in because their watch is such a limited amount of real estate. You really have to consider that. And one of the value adds as a UX designer is to thoroughly think that through. You can't be lazy on even though we design for mobile first, you can't be lazy when you design for desktop, watch, TV, or tablet. All of the experiences need to be phenomenal. One important thing to know when you're designing for all the different platforms is that you have to maintain brand identity. Who remembers what brand identity is? What does brand identity consist of?
colors,
Brand colors. What else?
logos,
Yeah. Brand logo. What else?
maybe a slogan.
That can be, yeah, brand identity. the font you use, right? So whether if the color shouldn't change because I'm on mobile opposed to being on desktop. It should be the same colors. The logo should be the same whether I'm on desktop, TV, watch, tablet, it should be the same. Whatever font is used should be the same font across the board. In terms of consistency and continuity, it also builds trust with the end user. It's very unsettling to have a different experience with the world we live in terms of phishing, smishing, just all types of security risk and just fraudulent sites and fraudulent. So one thing that subconsciously makes users feel more secure is the consistency in brand identity. Because even though you may not notice it, even just a slight variation in color can make you feel uncomfortable. Right. So it's very, it has a lot, not only it's not just about aesthetics, it also establishes a sense of security. Now, of course, hackers or anyone who's trying to push forward a fraudulent site or a fake site, a phishing site, a smishing, it's called submishing, a smishing site, they can mimic, they can mimic really, really well. It's not a foolproof. Identity does not make you fraud proof, but it does give the end user a better sense of security when you're consistent across the board, across all platforms. Does that make sense? Yes, no? Are you guys still there?
Yes, it makes sense.
Okay. I have here's a pop quiz. 72 seconds versus 150 seconds. What do those two numbers represent? Just guess. Angela, 72 seconds versus 150 seconds.
How long it takes to go to click on something?
Janella, what's your guess?
I was gonna say that 2-click rule, or versus somebody leaving the site because they couldn't figure it out and the site losing money because of it.
Those are good guesses. And I'm going to speak to your guesses, but I'm going to tell you what the numbers are first. So 72 seconds is the average amount of time that mobile users spend on the site. 150 seconds is the average amount of time a desktop user spend on the site. So what does that tell us? If the average user on mobile, they're only staying on the site for 72 seconds, and the average user on desktop is staying on the site or an application for 150 seconds, what does that indicate to you as a designer? How does that guide your design process? How does that information guide your design process, Angela?
I would say that maybe, well, the initial first thought that came to my mind was that maybe they have less distractions if they're at a desktop, because they're actually sitting down in front of the computer. And the mobile is mobile, so they got a lot of other outside influences to where they might not be able to focus. But then again, on the mobile, it's easier to navigate. Well, I don't want to say easier, but it's a smaller. You don't have to use a mouse or whatever the mouse pad to move around. You can just use your finger, and it's right there, so it's faster.
Mm-hmm. Or at least it should be.
Mm-hmm.
So that information, for me, the way I would utilize that information as a UX designer is that information tells me everything we design, what's the number one thing we hold in the forefront of our minds for every design choice we make. Do you remember I said it before we went on break? It goes all the way back to week 1. What do we hold on to? I said we hold hands for this. We never let this go. We always hold on to this for every design decision we make. Who remembers what I said? Everything that we do, we are designing with the what in mind.
The user.
The
client
goal,
goal is
what their goal is, what their objective is. So if the data tells me that mobile users stay on the site an average of 72 seconds and desktop users stay on the site for an average of 150 seconds, that data tells me that the end user is in a rush when they're on mobile. That means that they're coming there to get their information and to leave. And Angela, what you alluded to is actually the answer to what how that influences me is that so my mobile design should be easier. Everything that I design for mobile, I should be able to easily click on things and get to where I'm going fast. So when you're designing, you're thinking, if I'm coming to this site or if I'm coming to this application from my mobile device, and if I'm in a rush and I'm just trying to get to where I'm trying to get to, first of all, the first question becomes, what do you think most people are coming to this site to do? What's the primary reason they're coming here? It's the primary reason to sign up. It's the primary reason to log in. It's the primary reason to become a member. What is the primary reason most people are coming here? And if the primary reason they're coming here is to look at their results, if you're designing mobile first, then on the home page, there needs to be a big center button that says view your results. If I know that the average person is coming for that reason, and if I know that mobile users are usually in a rush and they're just trying to get to it. On a desktop design, I may have more flexibility to add more options. So maybe view your results may still be at the top, but maybe under view your results, without you having to scroll, you may see book an appointment or you may see sign up for the newsletter. But more than likely, somebody coming in from mobile does not care about the newsletter. So it would be a poor mobile design choice for me to place sign up for the newsletter front and center, because the business may care about it, right? Because they're like, we want to build our mailing list. It may be a top priority for them. And the business may say, we want the first thing that people to see when they log in is for them to sign up for the newsletter because we need leads. But that is, again, that's not a good choice because the average user is not coming there from mobile. They want to see their results. So that's what those two numbers indicate. So for mobile, you want to make sure, like you said, Angela, it's easy to tap, it's easy to swipe. You always consider the mind frame of the end user, because everything that we design with the what in mind first. We just said it. Angela, do you remember what it was? Because Janella answered it. Everything we design with the what in mind first. Angela?
You just said it. I was listening. I don't know why I can't remember the word. Wait, don't tell me. I'm thinking again.
It doesn't have to be the exact word, just what are we designing? Every design choice we make, we design with the blank in mind first.
Oh, the goals. That's right.
Whose goals?
The user goals. Well,
the end user's goals, the end user's objective. Every design choice is always made from the end user's objective first. So what is it again?
The end user goal. End user goal.
Goal or objective. Yep. Another thing, when we talked about a design being socio-economically inclusive, give me some examples of what we consider when we're considering whether or not our design is socio-economically inclusive.
Socio-economically?
So let's take it back. All right, let's talk about economics. If we're talking about apps, accessing apps, devices, and if we're looking at different users and we're looking at users across the board, what are some things we have to consider economically when we're designing our app? We're considering the person's economics. We're considering their life, their budget. Why do you think we need to consider their budget, their socioeconomic status when we're designing applications?
You mean our client or
Our end user, the end
oh.
users. How does
Yes,
the
so we can make sure that our end users, because now I'm the client, right?
No,
In the
the
web.
end users is still, we're always talking about the same end users, the user experience, the people using the app.
No, I'm saying I'm answering the question as a okay, I'm answering as a UX designer. After I spoke to the client about what they want, so their socioeconomics would match.
This is not about this is not about the business. This is about
Okay.
the end user. So why do we have to consider the end user's socioeconomic status as we're designing this application? The consumers, the people who are actually going to be using the application. Why do we have to consider their socioeconomic status? How does their socioeconomic status impact the way they're going to interact with the app?
Oh, it might be what they're interested in.
It's a good guess, but no.
No. I don't think I understand the question.
How is it that why do we have to consider the amount of dispensable income an end user has when using our app? How is that going to directly impact them using our app? It's something that most people don't consider. So I'll just, so the reason we have to consider it is because we can't assume that everyone can afford a $1,200 iPhone. We can't assume that everyone can afford a lightning fast processing MacBook. The reason that matters is because when you're designing your application, if your application is image heavy, someone who can only afford a $50 phone is going to be waiting 3 days for your page to load because their processor is slow. Right. So like if you design an application that is video heavy, image heavy, that only responds to the latest browser, the latest phone browser. If you got all this functionality where you have to have like the latest and greatest phone, tablet, or device to have an enjoyable experience, you're not being you're not being socioeconomically inclusive. Because if the only way I can enjoy this app is if I have the latest iPhone, that's kind of not fair. You know what I mean? Like if I come to the website or the web app and if I have the latest, fastest MacBook, so the site is loading in a half a second for me, but if someone else who can't afford the latest, greatest processor, if it's taking 3 hours for the site to load for them, then that design is not socioeconomically inclusive. So when you're designing, like I said, once we get past the workflow, when you start adding the bells and whistles, so to speak, you got to make sure that when, think about how long is it gonna, what's the load, what's the data load? So remember in week 1, remember the video we watched about how the internet works? And remember we saw the servers, and remember we saw how the information travels from the server to the actual end user. Do you remember that video?
Yeah.
So the heavier the load is, the heavier the load is on the system, the longer it's going to take for that person's device to consume whatever it is they requested. So we have to be mindful of that. That's a thing that most people don't consider. But the reason I let you struggle with it is because the things you struggle to answer are the things you remember. I didn't necessarily expect you to have the answer, but if you did, I would have been surprised.
Okay.
So when we're designing for multiple platforms and we're designing for mobile users, we want to make sure that the website is responsive. We're going to look at some examples of what it means to be responsive. But that just basically means a lot of times it'll make everyone's job a lot easier if we design responsively, meaning that the application is going to respond to whatever device is viewing it. So if a phone is viewing the site, it's going to respond one way. If a tablet is viewing the site or application, it'll respond and it'll expand to fill the space. And if a desktop is viewing the application, it'll expand to respond to the space. We design for mobile first. Why do we design for mobile first? I just said it.
Because more people use mobile.
Yeah, more people are going to access it for mobile. We want to make sure when we're designing for mobile users, we want to make sure what does CTA stand for?
I don't remember.
Call to action.
Call to action.
We want to make sure the call to action is placed front and center. And what's the call to action?
The goal, right?
Yeah, but give me an example of a call to action.
Signing up, looking
Yeah,
at.
it's a button that says sign up, or it's a button that says pay now, buy now, whatever. It's just it's a call to action. Navs and menus are short and simple. So for mobile users, you want to present a consolidated version of the navigation menu, and it should be the core function. So if you're building like a site that's complex, and let's just say there's like 20 different paths you can take, you don't want to show 20 different paths by default in the mobile. Now, one thing that I hate as a user, I hate when I don't have the same options at all. I hate when, like, I get consolidating the menu so that like when I first look at the menu, I maybe only see the top 3 things that are most popular, but I hate going to a website or a web application and there's no way possible for me to access what I need to access. I think that's a very poor UX design choice that's becoming a trend, and it shouldn't be. Because sometimes like I'm on the go and I don't have access to my desktop or my laptop, but I really need to log in and do something that typically I would do on my desktop, but I don't have the luxury of my desktop with me. So I feel like there should be a menu item that says, see more, but don't just take away the option altogether. That's a horrible experience. Gestures are like clicks, swipes, anything that someone has to do to open a form, anything that an end user has to do to navigate throughout the application should be intuitive. So what I mean, give me an example of something that's not intuitive. What would be a gesture that's not intuitive? So if you see a button, what's intuitive? What's your intuitive reaction if you see a button on a website?
Click it.
Yeah, what would be not intuitive for a button?
Drop it down.
Yeah, to swipe it or something.
Yeah.
So it's like when you're designing it, don't implement things that you think will be cool and they're not intuitive. Because if I see a button, my assumption is I should be able to click on the button. Like, don't create a button and then I have to do something crazy like drag it in a circle in order, you know what I mean, for it to take me to the next. That's going to be frustrating. Portrait and landscape. Also, when you're designing, you want to make sure, how does this look if someone is holding their phone in portrait, vertical mode? And how does this design look if someone is to turn their phone sideways and they do a horizontal landscape view? Does the design look good, whether it's portrait or landscape? And another thing you want to do, you want to consider in terms of designing for mobile first, you want to reduce visual clutter. Like I said, because what's the average time as of today? Because that always changed. But what's the average time that a person stays on a mobile app?
75 seconds, right?
72 seconds.
72.
So if I'm only there for 72 seconds, don't give me a whole paragraph to read. Like, reduce the visual clutter. Let me get straight to what I'm trying to get to.
Okay.
So what I did want to do is I wanted to show you guys an example of responsive design so that you can visually see what that means.
Responsive. And the other one you talked was intuitive, right?
Well, it's just that the gesture should be intuitive.
Okay.
That's just like, any gestures that you add should be intuitive. Let's go to, I always go to Apple just because I know that their site is going to do everything it's supposed to do. All right. So this is the desktop view, right? This is what I see when I'm viewing it from a desktop. Can you guys see that?
Yeah.
Now, when I say a design is responsive, this design is aware of the screen size that it's on, and it dynamically responds based on the screen size. So what that means is this: as the screen becomes smaller, it's not, let me do it this way. It's not responding. I think that's more of a me thing. Oh. How dare it not respond when I'm doing a demonstration? It did not respond.
Let me see if it do it on my screen.
Or is this the way? Why would they? Let me see. Hold on. Oops. Let me try it again. Darn it. Just let me down. They let me down. Let me go to another site. Well, the menu responded. Did you see how the menu responded? Can you guys see that?
Yeah.
And it may be that it knows. Let me see if I go on my phone. Because it may actually know that I'm just shrinking the size, and it may not be. Let me see if it does it if I go to my phone.
Maybe put down. Yes.
If I go on my phone, let me see if it's different. I'm going to the Apple store. Oh no, that's what they chose to do. That's messed up. Okay. F for Apple. Okay, let's go to a different site. Let's go to, who may be responsive? Let's go to Home Depot. I always see if they're accessible. I mean, responsive. Home Depot. Not now. Okay. I don't think it let me choose. It's just getting smaller. Oh, everybody let me down. Let me see if I go here. Darn it, it's not responding. Okay, that's not good. Let me go to who may respond? FedEx. I go home. Oh, thank God. FedEx responds. Did you see that? So look at this. Can you guys see my screen?
Yeah.
So this is their desktop version. You see, we call this the hero. We'll get into that lingo later, but pay attention to the words I use. But the top image when you first land, this is called the hero section, which is the call to action section that's above the fold. So we have the hero, and then under the hero section, we have rate, track, and locations, right? You see that track is highlighted. I think one time you guys, when I asked you the week before last, I said, what's the number one reason you come? And didn't someone say to track your package?
Yeah.
Well, that's probably why they have that highlighted purple. Remember we talked about that? And then, but rate and ship is not, but they know most people are coming for this. So they have it standing out. And then we have this section where we have like our different icons, right? Let's see if it's responsive. Did you guys see that change?
Oh, yeah.
Right? Look at that. That wasn't there in the desktop version. Look. We'll open it back up. You see that?
Mm-hmm.
So they're giving you a different mobile experience. Look at the track, because what did I say about mobile?
Get right to it.
Get right to it. If you know that most people are coming here to track their package, if I'm on my phone, you see how that looks? But look how it looks when I'm on desktop. It's there, but it's not as like, and it's still the number one thing. Because remember, I told you mobile first does not mean that you shouldn't have a good experience on desktop. It doesn't mean that. So they're still following the rules. They're still saying the reason that most people come here is to track their package. So they still made sure that tracking the package happens above the fold. They still made sure that they called it out more. But look how boldly they called it out in mobile. That's very bold. And look at the icons. You see how the icons automatically stack? Because their website is aware of the size of the device and it's responding. So look at how this section looks on mobile, but look how it looks on desktop. You see how on desktop we have it's horizontal? But if I'm looking at it on my phone, it looks like this. It stacks because that's a better experience for me mobilely. Opposed to what I'm surprised Apple didn't do. I'm very highly disappointed. But going back to like their site, and I went to it on my phone and it wasn't better. I'm so surprised. So going back to their site, you see how they have my expectation. I was like, oh, they're going to make the panel stack. But look, when I go to mobile, I'm just swiping left to right, which I guess is okay, but I would prefer, I think the other experience is better because I keep having to swipe left to right. That's not really a good mobile experience. This is a much better experience, you know. And look at this. You see how they have on desktop where they have grow with the cash grant. Check it out, right? You see how we're doing like we got 2 minutes. You see how we're going like back and forth with the panels. Look, so when I go to mobile, look at how that responds. It's stacked. I don't have to scroll left and right.
Right.
So this is a visual representation of what it looks like to create a mobile first design that's responsive. So when you're designing your mocks, when we get to that part of it, you're going to have a mock that represents this layout. This is going to be your desktop layout, right? But you're also going to have a mock that represents what it looks like in mobile. So you're going to have a mock that represents this layout. And if you go smaller for like something like a fitness app, you're going to have a mock that represents what it looks like when someone accesses it from their watch, their smartwatch. So that is what responsive design is. And that's what it looks like when you design for mobile first. All right, so do you have any questions before we go to lunch?
No.
Okay. See, I didn't forget this time. I did not forget this time. I was watching. All right, so it's time for our lunch break. We'll make it an even hour since we're 5 minutes before. So I'll see everyone back at 1.
Okay.
Okay.